Well, hello there, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people, you. It's Monday. It's Monday, baby, and this is video 2 of potentially 3. We'll see what brings, or what the news brings today. You know what I mean. There's possibly 3 videos today, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel, make sure that you've got notifications switched on so not to miss anything. We know that notifications are a little bit sketchier than a sketchy thing in Moscow, Idaho. And talking about Moscow, Idaho, that's where we are today, because I want to go over some notes with you all, because we are currently still awaiting Judge Hippler to grant a Franks hearing. Now, I believe that the vast majority of us who are, how can I say, I was going to say of sound mind, those of us of sound mind probably feel that there should be a Franks, no, definitely feel that there should be a Franks hearing, and those who believe that, I don't understand, but those of the people who are out there who genuinely believe Bryan Kohberger to have done this crime, they probably will not want a Franks hearing and will go as far as to say there doesn't need to be a Franks hearing, and I am here to show you at least 11 reasons why there should be a Franks hearing. And hopefully by the end of it we may have converted some of the currently stuck in their little box thinking that Bryan Kohberger was stargazing, that he was pinging in the area, that he was driving around the area, that he was messaging the girls on social media, that he was touching Wi-Fi while brandishing a kill kit. Maybe you will understand that you have been conditioned. You've been conditioned to feel a certain way, see certain things in a certain way, and that has led you to have been massively misled, and that should concern you because you're not even on the jury and you have been misled. You have been conditioned. You have been lied to feel a certain way. Now, if the jury have gone down the same path as what you have as a current guilter, then that should scare you. That should scare you more than the original Aliens film, Ridley Scott. That should scare you more than that. Should scare you more than that, because that would prove that you don't even have to commit a crime to potentially be lined up against a wall and executed for one. So let's get into these 11 reasons. And if you want to argue with me, please do. But do so respectfully and show me your proof. Show me your evidence. If you believe that Bryan Kohberger did this crime, I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is when you say that you believe Bryan Kohberger did this crime and then you spout bollocks like, well, he was obviously the person who did it because he was stargazing and on this particular night it was cloudy and he wouldn't have been able to see any stars. You're an idiot if you still think that, and I've pointed this out countless times. Anyway, let's get into these 11 reasons. 11 reasons, baby. Now, these are from my man Eddie, and once again, I'm not Eddie. I'm not Eddie. Can you remember was it the singers, Charles and Eddie? I'm Charles, he's Eddie, 2 different people. He sent me this. I forwarded it over to my other email address because that's on the laptop so I can screen share it, and obviously it strips his details away from it as well. Some of you actually know who Eddie is, but he's not me. He's not me. So, look, number 1, law enforcement found the defendant not in the area between 3 and 5 a.m. As stated in the PCA, if you want to argue that point, that is, and say, no, that's not what they're saying, that's not what they're saying at all, then please tell me. Please tell me that I'm wrong. Show me that I'm wrong. Explain how I'm wrong. In the PCA stipulates that Bryan Kohberger is not in the area between 3 and 5. Now, they go on to try to say that the reason why this could potentially be is because he's connected to a white Hyundai Elantra and a phone, and the phone is not communicating to the network. But, look, what you have been conditioned to believe is that Bryan Kohberger turned his phone off. Now, law enforcement haven't even said that. They have not even said that he turned his phone off. And why is that? Because his phone most likely wasn't off. But it had to be worded in a specific way that made you, the guilter, believe that he switched his phone off. But go back and read it, and you will learn that at no point did they say that Bryan Kohberger actually turned his phone off in order to hide his whereabouts at the time of this crime. Number 2, prosecution finally admits the same. So remember, you've got two entities. You've got law enforcement who actually turn around and do the investigation, and then the prosecution team who are handed that information, and it is their job to carry it through the court system. And now both of these, the prosecution are finally admitting the same thing, that Bryan Kohberger wasn't seen in the area. And how do they do that? They turn around and do this by admitting that the PCA is irrelevant. And why do they deem it irrelevant? Because there's nothing within the PCA that supports the hello. There's nothing on the PCA that supports the charges brought against Bryan Kohberger and the accusations. It's just, there's nothing there, so it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant because if you're willing to read it, it states that he's not there, that the car quite possibly isn't his car that's seen in the area. In fact, it's stated by an FBI specialist that it's not his car in the area. The 12 times that he visited the area, again, that can be pulled holes in because the defence team have located the fact that they know what he was doing in these periods of time when he was frequenting this area. They know exactly where he was. Most importantly, they know where he wasn't. Defence requesting the free male's identity over and over, which, again, if you've been following the courts, you've been following the court documentation, there has been this bone of contention with there being other identifying, which we'll get to, identifying markers at the scene of the crime that is seemingly being protected by the prosecution. They have been requesting, the defence have been requesting discovery over and over and over and over again, time and time again, 20-odd times. Now, just for those who are not 100% sure on what discovery is, go and watch the film Fracture, Ryan Gosling, and the massively famous, I can't remember his name, Anthony Hopkins, brilliant film, Fracture. Now, there is a segment in that where Ryan Gosling and I've forgotten his name again. They're together, right? They're together, they're in a room, and they're talking about discovery, where he has sent the discovery back and written no all over it. No. And Ryan Gosling says, no, you can't do that. This is discovery. This is where me, the prosecution, gives you all of the evidence that we have against you, everything that we have. And then you can then properly prepare to fight this case against you. That's discovery. The legal requirement to hand over all of the evidence that's going to be used to try to convict you so that you can properly prepare. So when somebody turns around and says, yeah, but they give him 51 terabytes worth of stuff, that's not discovery. That is just everything. They're giving them every single thing and then making them do their job for them. And that's the way it is. Because they're basically saying, well, in amongst all of that 51 terabytes of stuff, there is going to be stuff that we use. This was a delay tactic. This was an underhanded way to make sure that Bryan Kohberger waived his rights to a quick trial because they were unprepared, because they didn't know what they were up against. And they still, to this day, don't know what they're up against. And you've got to ask yourself, why is that a thing? How is that possible to be 2 years down the line? And then we'll get to a more important part in a second. But you understand. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. So number 4, the 8-hour window issue. There is an 8-hour issue. There's an 8-hour piece of time here that can't just be explained away. You can't just turn around and stick your head in the sand and say, oh, that's easy to explain. Well, explain it then. They either saw stuff, they either heard stuff, they are either communicating with each other, as we've been told. They were texting each other, they heard stuff, saw stuff, but then there was an 8-hour delay between all this stuff happening and law enforcement actually being called. And by the time EMTs got to the house, there's an abundance of people around here. So you can't just explain that away, I'm afraid. It's not something that you can explain away. So then we have Funk's evidence. We have been told that Bethany Funk has evidence that's exculpatory to the client. I don't think I need to go any further on that. These are things that are said that are about her experiences that are unique to her. Nobody else had them, which which read between the lines, it means that what she saw and heard differed from what Dylan Mortensen heard. And Dylan Mortensen was the only person who was used within the PCA, her statements. So you have to ask yourself, why was her statements used? And then later on down the line, they then shit can her by saying that she's basically not someone who can be trusted. But then not take the person who we find out could potentially have exculpatory evidence. And I would say that there's a conflict here. There's a fracture between what one is saying and what the other is saying that brings a whole story into question. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Make more sense of it than I have. So then we've got Kohberger forced to forgo the speedy trial right, discovery not turned over, which is what I briefly spoke about in the last point. We're 20-odd requests for discovery deep, and that shouldn't be the case. However, you as a guilter want to say that's normal or that's all right or that's just the way things are. No, it's not all right. It's not how things go. Discovery is a legal requirement for the prosecution to hand over all of the evidence that's being used against an accused person so they can look over what's being thrown at them so they can correctly sort themselves out, get themselves in an order to fight it. That's as simple as that's it in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell. And again, you can't bury everything. You have to give them what you're actually bringing to the table. Not just say, well, there you go, there's a fucking shit ton of stuff, and in there's a lot of stuff that don't matter. There's probably 51 terabytes worth of stuff that you don't need, but in amongst that, there's about 50 megabytes of stuff that you will need, but you'll just have to find it. Fuck off. If they had a strong case, they would have handed discovery over. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. If they had a slam dunk case, they had everything, they had DNA, they had this, that, and the other, it would all come forward quite fluidly, and it hasn't. There's been nothing fluid about it at all. So here we go. Now blood evidence is known in 2 places. Do I need to say any more? So you've got a crime scene where people are viciously executed in the manner with which they were, and now we find 2 years down the line that there was in fact blood found at the scene of the crime which belonged to unidentified males. But we're supposed to just ignore that, because we've got the knife sheath. Have we got the knife sheath? Have we rarely? Stick a pin in it, but again, we don't need to go on about that too much. So no statements from Funk in the PCA, again, which I've touched on. There's no statements from her. In fact, you would surely you've got to question that. You've got to question it, but to make sure this video isn't a million hours long, again, no statements from Bethany Funk in the PCA. She was at the scene of the crime. She was one of the 2 surviving members of this household. One of them makes a statement, goes into the PCA and becomes the foundation for the accusation against Bryan Kohberger. The bushy eyebrows, the size, whatever. The time frame, the timeline of this crime is based on these 2 individuals. Yet one of them, they're completely exempt from being part of the PCA. No statement. The unexplainable lack of evidence. There is a lack of evidence, even though so many people want to turn around and say, oh, you're ignoring all the evidence. What fucking evidence? We're 2 years down the line, and look, yeah, there might be stuff in there, and when it goes to trial, they might flip stuff out. But then this is a trial by ambush, and that ain't on either, because that's not right. Discovery. Give us discovery. Okay, here's discovery. And that's how it should work. But there is a lack of evidence, a complete lack of evidence. The phone pings, there were no fucking phone pings. There was no phone pings in the area. He was not in the area. He was not found to be in the area by the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. Not in the area. And then when they do eventually say about his location via phones, it's not in the fucking area, it's away from the area. We have a car facing in the opposite direction. We have one car at the scene that is deemed not to be Bryan Kohberger's, and then you've got another car that they know is Kohberger's, and they specifically show a picture of his car, and that is correctly identified by the same FBI agent who said that the one at the house basically ain't his. No kill kits, no touch and Wi-Fi, no stalking, no DMs through social media, nothing. No DNA in the car, no DNA in the house, nothing at the house, nothing at his apartment, nothing found. Nothing. Tell me I'm wrong. But people want to latch on. He was doing weird stuff in the kitchen. He had gloves on. Yeah, he had kitchen gloves on while he segregated trash. We hear that the guy's a potential germaphobe. He's a vegan. He's in a property in an area where they have to segregate trash. Have to. That has to be done. It's a legal requirement. Why were they there like that? A bloke who was so dangerous that it took this massive great attack on the home to get to him, and yet they seemingly allowed him to stroll around doing his thing for over a month, just wandering around, but so dangerous it took all this to arrest him. Not buying that shit either. So, number 10, Sahara finding mapping missing at the King Road house. No kidding. Again, the phone situation, we're back to this old story, aren't we? Where they want to tell you that he travelled in this route, but they don't have the evidence to support their claim. And without it, they are simply guessing. But you've been conditioned to believe that he was driving in the area, who drove this route. And then you've got other content creators who, just because they can make some animation with a car driving around, people think that that's fucking gospel. It ain't. It's not gospel. There's nothing. They don't have anything. They have no different than someone who's speculating about someone driving around an area. And how did they do that? Oh, because there's roads. Oh, we think he must have took this road because it exists. There's a road there, so we think he drove on that. Well, have you got a camera that shows that he did? No. His phone was also not on the network, so we can't show that, but it was on a network somewhere else when he's away from the property, which was his actual alibi, that he's driving around but not here. Do you know what I mean? And they don't want to bring all the rest of the data required to prove their point, because it very likely won't. So where is the missing data? Where is the data that would support that? And why wouldn't they have it if they wanted to show that? Do you know what I mean? You have to question, why didn't you add those details into it? Why didn't you get all of your ducks in a row? Most likely because if you did, it wouldn't have supported what you said. And 11, court violating terms of service on two ancestry sites, ouch, which was the last. That's the final nail in the coffin. Shouldn't have done it. Why did they do it? Why did they go after the dad's DNA? And when that snidey fucker turns round and says that Bryan Kohberger hadn't said that he was, that he was a customer to this site, so how can he say that he's able to call upon the terms of service of the site if he's not a customer of the site? Which then you think to yourself, oh, cheers, mate, because what you've basically said is when you went on there, you didn't find Bryan Kohberger on there. So that's actually why you went to get his father's DNA, because you didn't find anything else. You needed his father's DNA. You got his father's DNA, and then you got a buccal swab. So then you had a familial match between two samples, and that was the buccal swab and the father's DNA. I believe that they were the only point with which there was a match between two DNA samples. I want to see the whole chain of custody from this knife sheath. I don't believe that there was DNA on that knife sheath. I don't believe it. They haven't shown it. They don't want to argue anyone who argues it. They don't want to get into a proper conversation about it. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself why. Why go after the father's DNA? You went after the father's DNA because you needed it. Why did you need it? Why did you need the father's DNA? You needed it because you needed two samples that provided a familial match across the two. That's why you needed the father's DNA. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Should there be a Frank's hearing? You're damn fucking right there should be a Frank's hearing. Will we get one? Well, time will tell. Because if we don't, what do you reckon, mate? Do you reckon Hitler's biased? Do you reckon he's biased? Try and get my... You keep jumping up here and then you want to go again. Yeah, do you know what I mean? It is what it is. Let me know what you think down below. because I'm interested to hear your thoughts and feelings. But if you are still someone who believes that Bryan Kohberger did this crime, he did it beyond a reasonable doubt, then you've got your head in the clouds somewhere and you're not listening, you're not paying attention, and that is fucking scary. That is scary. Love you all, and I'll catch you all later on today. Mwah.